Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, has more than 70 million views and is now one of the 5 most watched TED Talks in history. But it's hard to imagine that before giving her TED Talk, Brené Brown was just a professor and not many people knew about her. She had some recognition in the research and social work communities in Houston, but she didn't have a well-known personal brand. Giving a TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability turned out to be one of the most transformative career shifts in the history of public speaking. So how does it happen? How does an unknown researcher go from a small Houston stage to becoming a thought leader and one of the most popular TED speakers? She is also the author of 6 #1 New York Times bestsellers, the host of 2 award-winning podcasts, has her filmed lecture on Netflix, and a $2 million endowed research chair. All happened after one TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability. Let's break down exactly why Brené Brown's TED Talk went viral and what you can take away from it to level up your own speaking career. And spoiler, it's not just that she's a talented speaker. There are actually 8 specific factors that helped her TED Talk go viral. 2 factors are about her message, 3 about the way she delivered it, and 3 more outside factors that not many people talk about, but they helped her become popular. Let's start with something that sounds obvious, but is actually one of the most important strategic decisions a speaker can make. Her topic is relatable to a wider audience. In her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, Brené Brown talks about vulnerability. And think about that for a second. It doesn't matter if you are a CEO, a new parent, a college student, or a retired. Vulnerability is something we all experience, whether in our personal or professional lives. But here's the part that made it viral rather than just relatable. She did not just say, "Hey, we all feel vulnerable. Isn't that interesting?" She reframed the entire concept. Before this talk, many people thought of vulnerability as a weakness, like something to manage or hide. In a TED Talk, Brené Brown flipped that idea completely upside down. She showed that vulnerability is actually the birthplace of connection, creativity, and courage. She did not just talk about the power of vulnerability. She gave you a new idea, a new perspective to think about. And that's what you can apply to your speeches. Don't talk about the ideas that people are familiar with. Show them a new perspective. Challenge their thinking about what they already know. Because when you give people a genuinely new way of thinking about something they've lived with their whole lives, they get an aha moment. They get an insight that they want to share with others. So people start talking about your ideas and you as a speaker. But here's where it gets interesting. If you want people to share your ideas, make them easy to share. Plan your speech with simple, memorable phrases and takeaways that people can repeat. Brené Brown talks using simple language. She also uses very few slides in the Power of Vulnerability TED Talk. But that simplicity makes people pay attention to what they hear or see. For example, she shows a slide with the word breakdown on it. Then she crosses it out and writes spiritual awakening. That's it. That's the whole slide. Then she does something even more vulnerable. Immediately after showing that slide, she admits that she had her own breakdown during the research. Brené Brown, in her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, shows that vulnerability right on stage. She also says she calls her experience a breakdown, but her therapist calls it a spiritual awakening. The audience laughs out loud, but they get the idea. And it works because the visual and personal story hit at the same moment. First, it does exactly what the best single visuals always do. It emphasizes a key idea in a few words. Second, She connects that simple insight with a memorable story that creates an emotional connection. This makes the audience see the concept differently and gives them something they can immediately understand and talk about. As for the slide, people can even take a picture of a slide and share it on social media with some of their thoughts, just like that. That's a memorable and shareable moment. Now, many speakers believe they need more slides, more data, more bullet points, more proof. But the moments and talks that people remember are almost never a full slide of content. They're a single image, a single phrase, one question that you ask them that makes them think. If you apply it to your speech, what is one slide version of your big idea? What could you show that speaks for itself and shifts the way people see everything? That's the slide your audience will still be thinking about next week. And these are two things about Brené Brown's TED Talk message that made it go viral. A topic relatable to a wider audience and memorable phrases and takeaways. Because when you tell people something they understand, relate to, and can easily share, that's what they do. They start talking about it and share with others. Now, even if your topic is incredibly useful and valuable, if your audience gets bored during your speech, it won't take you very far. Brené Brown doesn't just talk about vulnerability in the abstract. She shows it through the life stories. Here's something I want you to pay close attention to, because it's one of the most counterintuitive things an expert can do on stage. Brené Brown opens her TED Talk not by establishing her authority through credentials, but by eliminating the distance between herself and the audience. In the first 30 seconds of her TED Talk, Brené Brown does something most professional speakers never do. She lets you see that she doesn't entirely fit the mold of what she's supposed to be. She tells the story about her conversation with the event organizer, about how to introduce her. Should she be introduced as a researcher, a credible authority, or as a storyteller, someone who makes things interesting but might not seem as credible? In the end, they decided to call her a researcher storyteller. That small story of not quite fitting in is one of the great moves in public speaking, because your audience spends the first few seconds of your talk looking for the answer to a question. Is this person like me, or are they above me? When they feel you are above them, they become critical because they know that you've got things already. However, for them, maybe your tips will work, but maybe not. But when you show a moment like, I did not have it all figured out too, they feel that you've been where they are. They trust you more. And later, Brené Brown also tells her origin story that she's the person who had the breakdown, an academic who goes to therapy and talks about it openly. She tells stories where, although she did her research and knows what she talks about, she's just a person with all the feelings and doubts like everyone else. She makes her stories relatable to the audience. Think about your past mistakes and challenges. The first instinct is to hide them and talk about your success and strategies. But your origin story and those struggles, those are the moments where you show that you're like them. You are equal to your audience. You understand where they are and can help them where they want to be. This builds trust. And when people trust you, they are more likely to apply what you share, get results, and happily share about them with others. They start sharing your ideas with more people. The other reason why Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, went viral is that Brené Brown has the credibility to back up her message. She was a social work professor with over a decade of research on vulnerability, shame, and human connection. But instead of just reciting statistics or dry research, she rubs them in stories. Brené Brown takes all her years of academic research and presents it through real-life examples, showing how her discovery applies to our daily lives. And that's the magic. You're not just hearing about studies, you're seeing them play out in everyday life. And that is what makes your message so compelling. It's a very powerful combination in public speaking when you combine logical facts, research data, or statistics with deeply emotional stories. Brené Brown doesn't cite her studies and doesn't talk about methodology at all. Instead, she wraps every piece of research inside a story. She talks about a conversation she had, a pattern she kept seeing, or a moment that surprised her. And that changes everything about how the audience receives it. When data is delivered as data, people process it. When data is delivered inside a story, people feel it. They put themselves in it, recognize their own experience. Here's how you can apply this to your public speaking. If you have expertise or have done research, instead of leading with the credentials and data, lead with the story. For example, saying, I kept hearing the same thing over and over from the people I interviewed. That's a story. 63% of respondents reported is just data. Your expertise is your credibility, but your stories are what makes people trust that expertise in the first place. Now, the next factor is a huge part of why Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, got so many views. This is one of the most underrated public speaking techniques, and it's the one I see professional speakers often get wrong. She's funny. Not a funny comedian, not joke teller funny, but she gets genuine laughs from the audience multiple times during her TED Talk. Brené Brown has this unique ability to blend humor with deep emotional moments. She makes people laugh and feel comfortable. And then she hits them with powerful emotional moments or insight. This back and forth between humor and seriousness keeps the audience engaged. They expect the humor, but when the emotional moments come, they feel it even more. And the thing is, those funny moments naturally blend into the stories that Brené Brown shares in her TED Talk. That authenticity makes you more relatable and trustworthy. And here's why that matters more than it might seem. When an audience laughs with you, there's a psychological thing that happens. Laughter releases tension, it builds rapport, and it signals to the audience that they are safe. Brené Brown balanced funny moments with deep emotional engagement, especially when discussing difficult emotions like shame and fear, which help create a strong emotional connection with the viewer. Because the topic she's about to go deep on, shame, vulnerability, fear of disconnection, that's not light material. If she opens at full emotional intensity, it can be too much for people, especially for a short speech like a TED Talk. And here's the other thing. Once she gets a few laughs, the audience starts anticipating more. They're paying more attention because they want to catch the next funny moment. She has trained them within the first few minutes to stay engaged. So think about your own presentations. If your topic is heavy or personal, don't open with the heavy part. Find something funny in your own story first. Make them laugh before you make them feel. The contrast will amplify both. So these are 3 factors about how Brené Brown delivered her The Power of Vulnerability TED Talk. Share stories that resonate with people, turn professional research and data into stories, and use humor for emotional engagement. Now let's dive into 3 extra factors that made Brené Brown's TED Talk go viral. Almost nobody talks about them, but they might be the most tactical insights in this video. Because yes, you can have a great idea to share and you can deliver it in a way that your audience will stay engaged, remember your speech, and start sharing it. But you also need to promote your idea so more people will know about it. Well, let's not ignore the obvious here. TED's platform gives a global reach. Being on TED automatically gives any speaker massive visibility. TED's platform has millions of viewers from all over the world. This is the kind of stage that can accelerate your public speaking career. But here's a small nuance. Being invited to speak at the main TED conference is difficult. You compete with hundreds of people when they select only a few. Many people give a TEDx talk as it's easier to get to. But TEDx talks don't get this global reach unless your TEDx talk gets promoted as TED Talk. And this is what happened with Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability. She didn't give this talk at TED. She gave it at a local TEDx event in Houston. And TED's editorial team chose to feature it. They pulled it from a small local event and put it in front of their global audience. Most TEDx talks never get that treatment. But because Brené Brown's TED Talk was so good, she had an interesting idea and delivered it in an interesting way. Her TEDx talk was promoted to TED, and now we know it as Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, not TEDx. But here's what it tells you. You don't need to give a speech on the biggest stage to make them popular. If we are honest, many people will never reach that popularity as Brené Brown has. What's more important is that you find your big idea and start sharing it consistently, polishing your message and your delivery. You can start with small stages and even give a TEDx talk and let your idea and speech quality do the work. Because here's another hidden accelerator for Brené Brown's career. Brené Brown's TED Talk kept getting recommended in curated playlists like Most Popular TED Talks or Leadership TED Talks, which meant that viewers who might not have actively searched for it ended up discovering it anyway. That can be on the TED platform, on YouTube playlist, in the blog post, and so on. That's how something as deeply personal as vulnerability reached millions. And think about it. The speech was structured so well that every emotional peak in Brené Brown's TED Talk is a shareable moment. The breakdown story, the reframe on the slide that we talked about, the funny but important moments, they are all designed, consciously or not, to be clipped, quoted, or sent to a friend. Think about your own content, not just your talks, but your videos, your LinkedIn posts, your podcast moments. What is the single sentence in each piece of content that someone would screenshot and send to their best friends at 11 p.m.? Something that they can't wait to share with a friend, because that sentence is the thing that can actually spread. Now, if you want to become a recognized speaker, if you want people to know your ideas, not just your name, the first step is getting honest about where you actually are right now. Because here's the thing, you can spend years polishing your delivery or your slides and still wonder why nothing is moving in your life. That's because public speaking skills alone won't get you known. Getting recognized for your ideas takes a combination of things, and most people are only working on one of them. I put together a free Level Up Your Public Speaking guide that will show you exactly what stage you are at right now and what your next move is if you want to grow as a speaker. I put the link in the description below. It's completely free. Check it out. And finally, let's talk about timing. Brené Brown's TED Talk came at the time when vulnerability, authenticity, and emotional intelligence were becoming central topics. People were looking for ways to connect more deeply, whether at work or in their personal lives. Brené Brown's message hit the sweet spot for what people need to hear. The culture was ready for this message. It's like when COVID-19 hit, everybody was talking about the pandemic. I remember Dr. Fauci was everywhere in the news. At that time, he became the leading federal expert on infectious disease in the US and was featured all over the world. This is how the right timing can accelerate your public speaking career. You can't always control the timing, but you can pay attention to what your audience is already desperately looking for and make sure you're building content that meets them there. So here's what Brené Brown's TED Talk teaches us if you put her techniques together. She used relatable topics, personal storytelling, research-backed insights, and emotional engagement to connect with her audience on a profound level. And she did all of this as an unknown speaker on a small stage with nothing to rely on except the quality of her thinking and her willingness to be genuinely uncomfortably honest. The question isn't whether you could do what Brené Brown did. The question is whether you know which of these things you already do well and which ones are costing you the attention you deserve. If you want to give speeches like top TED Talk speakers, check this video next.